In this video, we will learn how to start an open source software strategy for your company. 3 instances. To ensure the maintenance of today's software and build tomorrow's, the largest companies and beneficiaries of open source must collaborate with the community and help it grow. According to a recent Tidelift survey, only 15% of organizations are extremely confident in their open source management procedures, yet a recent Red Hat survey showed that 80% of enterprises expect to increase their use of enterprise open source software for emerging technologies. Companies must do more to engage with and contribute to the open source community in order to close the developer talent gap and retain developers. There are many ways for companies to promote open source programs, but here are 3 that can get you started. Human advancement is dependent on technology, and there will probably never be another significant breakthrough that does not rely on software. Behind all of this innovation is the worldwide open source community, which comprises tens of millions of individuals involved in software development. Automotive, healthcare, and climate tech are just a few fields that rely on software behind the scenes. It's important to note that the mass of people who contribute to open source projects are not all explicitly identified by name. How global platforms might be re-engineered for our multi-cloud reality. Enterprises and beneficiaries of open source cannot maintain today's software and create tomorrow's without open source. However, to maintain today's software and create tomorrow's, the largest organizations and beneficiaries of open source must expand their collaboration with the community and help it grow. According to a recent Tidelift survey, only 15% of organizations are extremely confident in their open source management practices, yet a recent Red Hat survey found that 80% of companies plan to use more enterprise open source software for new technology. Understand your organization's open source software engagement and processes. Do you have a clear picture of your organization's current work with open source developers? Do your teams have a proper understanding of your collaboration and processes to partner with open source projects? Formal processes for contributing to open source can prevent developers from making upstream contributions. According to the Tidelift study previously mentioned, 61% of organizations have a formal approval process for introducing new open source components, yet getting approval to use new open source components in large organizations can take a week or more, due to a lack of process. Companies should make every effort to release all code and allow developers to use their software in order to make open source code releases easier. A lightweight set of guidelines for open source projects is also beneficial. Companies will be able to speed up the approval process and determine what good maintenance and governance mean to them if they set these guidelines up. Provide structure to your open source program through a company-managed open source program office. Creating an Open Source Program Office, OSPO, can help supercharge growth around your open source processes if getting an understanding of current work and setting up processes is the first step. An official OSPO function cross-functionally across your company to reduce potential barriers with departments like legal, HR, engineering and security. Open source programs can also be managed at scale through an OSPO. Startups as well as large corporations across technology, finance, and academia can create the program offices to help manage open source. This group is the front line for support on open source when developers have questions. OSPOs are not limited to developers, engineers, and program managers. Professionals from any field can create them. The To-Do Group is a good example of a non-profit organization that provides case studies, instructions, procedures, and surveys to support organizations in establishing OSPOs. Support developers and the open source community by funding and sponsorship. Everyone should support open source to ensure the world remains connected. Even small contributions help to lift the efforts of the entire community. For example, many open source software developers dedicated their time and resources to fixing last year's Log4j software supply chain vulnerability. These developers deserve recognition and support for their work. Sponsoring open source projects and developers is a great place to start if your company relies on them. There are a variety of options, including Outreachy, Open Collective, and GitHub sponsors, as well as several foundations like Linux Foundation, OpenJS, and more. You can support open source in any capacity thanks to these organizations. The open source projects power our key software systems and the global economy, but they also work in tandem. Companies that rely on the community need to work more closely with developers, maintainers, and contributors to produce software that delivers innovation. By utilizing an open source strategy at their businesses, organizations can provide outstanding experiences in a short period of time, collaborate with the developer community, support the projects that matter to them most, and contribute to the future of software together. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Kindly like, subscribe, and comment below.